gods of the city, right, having bad opinions, is mostly what they convicted him of, sentenced him to death and promptly killed him. Father of Western philosophy, killed by his own neighbors. All right, what can you do? But he was not universally reviled, and the vote to convict was actually relatively close, a few more the other way, and he would have lived. He did have a number of friends, and the Platonic dialogues through which we know him, we also know him through Xenophon and Aristophanes, but really we know him through Plato. The dialogues present him in conversation with his friends, for lack of a better word, and it was a weird lot, right? You know, he was an old man, and his friends were all very young men, and there's some strange dynamics that come with that. But one of his friends went to this place. This is the Oracle at Delphi. And I'll give you this is the most important religious site in the ancient world. This is what it looked like in its heyday. This is the Oracle at Delphi. It was a woman. She was the most powerful woman in the ancient world, the most powerful religious figure in the ancient world. And the story went that you could ask her a question. She would slip into this trance right here. She would commune with the gods. She would get an answer to her question, which she would then give to you. And Socrates' buddy went there and said to the oracle, "Is there any man wiser than Socrates?" She did this business, came back and said, "No." The friend, being a good friend, went back to Socrates and said, "Socrates, you're not going to believe this. The oracle says you're wisest." And Socrates, without missing a beat, said, "Nope, no, I'm not." Having realized that he had just committed some sort of blasphemy, they took a step back and tried to figure out how it was that the oracle might be right. And Socrates came to the conclusion that the oracle might actually be right. He might be wisest. But if she were correct, the only reason he's wisest is because he knows the limits of his own knowledge. He's keenly aware of his own ignorance. And we get this expression. Socrates never actually utters this in any dialogue, but it's really close if you put it all up together. As for me, I know nothing. And you have to ask some hard questions about that. Is it the case, and you don't have to take pictures, I can just give you these slides later. I'll make them available to you, Robert. Did Socrates really think that he didn't know anything? That's ridiculous. Socrates was an incredibly intelligent human being. He was incredibly intelligent. He knew it just as well as everyone else. He wanted to make the point that there were things he didn't know. And as I get older, I become very aware that I don't know as much as I did when I was 18. I don't, right? I was very sure of things when I was 18. The world becomes progressively grayer with each passing year. That's a curiosity to be remembered, and I think he's trying to get you to think about that sort of thing. So now I want to talk about pencils. Not exactly the easiest segue in the world, but I'll work with you here. I actually love pencils. I have a pencil collection. I think about pencils way too much. way too much. I literally have 2,000 pencils in my office, maybe more. How much does a pencil cost? Who's laughing at me? How much are you laughing at me?
96 of them cost $15.
Yeah, it's an idiotic ask room full of teachers what a pencil costs, and you actually get the answer. Usually when I ask this question, nobody knows, but you guys would know. Pencils are actually so cheap, so completely inexpensive, and you guys should watch yourselves, because I pull this crap everywhere I go. I actually steal them. I'll freely admit this. I'm not telling you should steal things. You should absolutely try to steal pencils. Because what happens is no matter where you go, you pick one up, you look at it, you walk out, nobody ever chases you. Nobody ever says, "Give me back my pencil." It's like, it would be like taking a paper clip. Who cares? We'll get another one, right? But here's the thing. Here's the thing. If that's true, if pencils are functionally free, and I have the box of stolen pencils in my office to prove it. That's a terrible, crappy pencil. It's terrible. You guys, I'm waking up nice and early today, thank you. Leonard Read, an economist in 1958, came out with this really short, very nice essay, accessible to any 8th grade mind. And he made this one stunning observation in the middle of it. He said, it is the case that there is not one person on this planet right now, nor has there ever lived a person on this planet who could make one of these from scratch. Nobody can make a pencil. All right, and everybody says, I can make a pencil, Leonard, shut up, right? Until you think about it for a minute. There's 6 constituent parts of the pencil. Everybody can always come up with 5. Let's see if you can get the 6. Go. Lead, all right, that's graphite.
Wood.
Speak up.
Wood.
Yeah, so we got wood, rubber, the metal,
Paint.
the paint. Everybody forgets paint. Yeah, that's right. But that's only 5. It's actually clay. I keep doing this thinking that something will happen. So this is actually graphite mixed with clay. The relative mixture gives you the hardness. So that's how you get a number 2 pencil, a number 3 pencil, more or less. So that's what you got. It's that simple. And yet, I know I can't make one because of those component parts. I might be able to make some paint, and I'd be faking it. And I think I can make clay because I know ancient people living near rivers could make clay. I'll probably figure it out. Beyond that, no, because the key part is from scratch, right? Okay, I have to get wood. I need a tool to get the wood. So I have to make the tool, the axe. The axe includes an axe handle, which is wood. And I'm in a continuous loop before I even start. Right, so if none of us can make a pencil, what can you make? Can you make anything? Maybe not. Right, let's think about toasters. You guys know this story? This is one of my all-time favorite stories. Right? The average garden variety toaster is $9.91, straight from the Walmart, the website that I looked at 2 years ago when I decided to talk about toasters. I don't think we've seen wholesale inflation in the toaster market. This is what a toaster looks like exploded. Right? So, all right, it's going to be a little harder to make a toaster. And I can make it a little worse. This is what a toaster looks like disassembled. I can't make that. Matter of fact, I doubt I could make any one part of that. But here comes Thomas Thwaites, and he decides, having read the pencil thing, he's going to make toasters. I guess he didn't want to make a pencil. And here he is with his toaster. Closer look at his toaster. That's the world's crappiest toaster. And you could see right off the bat that he's cheating. I see at least 3 things here that indicates he's cheating. What do you got? Yeah, the prong is clearly bought off the rack, right? That's not a plug that he made. And if you follow it straight down, I don't think he made those wires either. And this to me has always seemed to be a piece of rebar that was hacksawed into place, right? So that much at least, and then you do a little digging and you find out that the plastic, now he did do his due diligence here. He met with a bunch of metallurgists and geologists from a local university trying to figure out how to make this thing. But it turns out he couldn't get the temperature high enough to make the plastic, so he's melting stuff in his microwave. Right? And before you know it, it's kind of like cheating. And it turns out it was a single-use toaster. This is actually the before picture, not the after. But he put the 2 pieces of bread in and pushed the plunger down, of course, and that's when the fire started. And as luck would have it, he put the fire out the way you do and waited for it to cool, and he pried it all open, pulled the 2 pieces of bread out. 3 of the 4 sides of bread were perfectly unburned. So actually he made a fireproof container for bread, which I bet if he had set out to do that, he would have failed. Right? That's an incredibly difficult thing to engineer. Right? This is just not great. Don't feel bad. He wrote this book. He went on tour. He made a fair amount of cash doing this. Anybody have any idea how much the toaster cost? Yeah. Parts, just parts, no labor. Speak up.
I said more than $9.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely correct. A little more. It turns out this was really quite a sucker bag, right? You probably don't want to do this. And then we got Andy George. I'm just endlessly amused by this guy, because all he wanted was a sandwich. He wanted a very specific kind of sandwich. He wanted a chicken sandwich with honey mustard. So he was going to make that from scratch. And if you think about it, maybe making food products from scratch is the better way to think about it, right? Because everybody will tell you they made something from scratch. My daughter said this all the time, and I look at them and I say, "You liars! You're lying to Dad." You know, that's him eating the sandwich that he in fact made. He said it was, quote, pretty good. Not excellent, not the best sandwich he ever had, just pretty good. And here he is growing the wheat. And this is how I know my daughters cheat, because they're not outgrown wheat. They don't have a millstone out back to make the flour. But Andy's cheating too. You can see it right from the first moment. He's got a tool in his hand that he didn't make. There's a bucket, it's a plastic business over there. Right? You want honey mustard, you're going to have to deal with bees, and bees will kill you if you don't wear this suit. He didn't make the suit. There's the chicken. I just put that in because vegetarians get horrified. And this sandwich cost him $1,500, not including 6 months worth of labor. Andy would have been dead from hunger if he needed this sandwich, right? So why are we talking about pencils, toasters, and sandwiches when I was supposed to be talking about education? That's a fair question. And it turns out it doesn't seem like we can do much. And worse than that, it doesn't seem like we can know much of anything either. And that gets to be a bit of a problem. And we end up looking for a relatively new way of thinking about things because of these observations. And to get this new way of thinking, we go to actually an economist of all things. And it's Hayek. You guys read Hayek at all? Hayek, it's hard to explain Hayek. It shifts around in your grasp a little bit. He did most of his work 40s and 50s and was roundly seen as a kook at the time. By the time you get to the 1980s, he'd been utterly rehabilitated. I think he won the Nobel Prize in '74, if memory serves. And when asked what economics was supposed to be doing, this was the answer he gave. He said, "The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design." Look at all the qualifiers in that statement. And if you think about it, our relatively new way turns out to be a very old way, because we're right back to Socratic ignorance. It's the same animal, right? So we've got two profoundly smart people advising us that we ought not think too much of ourselves. We ought think twice before we start making grand statements about what we think we know. But for Hayek, he offers a set of further observations. He says this isn't going to be a problem. It's not going to be a problem because of something rather unique to the human condition. He says there's this thing, spontaneous order. And it just emerges wherever there are human beings, wherever people do things together. He says it's a system which is developed not through the central direction or patronage of one or a few individuals, but through the unintended consequences of the decisions of myriad individuals, each pursuing their own interests through voluntary exchange, cooperation, and trial and error. You know, life. We live, things happen, patterns emerge. It should be really simple to come up with all kinds of examples here, but you know, it never is. Hayek says this defines almost everything about your life that's important. And people struggle to figure out what that means. And I think it's kind of like asking a goldfish to describe water. Right? Water is the omnipresence. Goldfish will never see it. So I want you to think about deaf children in Nicaragua. One of my favorites. This little girl, one of the 50 I'll talk about. I wish I knew her name. I'd probably reverse search the image and figure it out. In Nicaragua, as in most of the third world, disabled children, what do you know about their lives? They're pretty grim. They tend to get warehoused with their families. Children have this habit of outliving their parents, at which point they would typically move on to another family member, or more likely out into the streets. And in the 1980s, very early 80s, Nicaragua's economy had just picked up a bit, and they did what almost every country who fits that description does. They took a look around and they said, we should do better for these people, and they came up with the list of people they wanted to do better by, and deaf children were right up at the top. So they built what we would call orphanages for these children. And she's in the first group of 50 that show up. And they bring them into a building, it's a pretty nice building, and they care for them in such a way that their bodily needs are all taken care of. Food, clothing, recreation, shelter, all taken care of. And that was about it. And these 50 kids show up, and imagine, if you can, that you thought you were the only one like that in the world, and now there are 49 others just like you. It's kind of an affirming moment, right, for the children. So the first thing is shock. But what's the first thing you absolutely know they did? What's the first thing you would do if it was you?
Try to communicate.
Try to communicate, of course, of course. And how is it that everybody intuitively knows that's the right answer? They're deaf, they've never had language instruction, yet you all know that's the first thing they do. And they started wandering about their environment, giving signs to the things that they came into contact with. Within 2 years, everything had a sign. They had adjectives, adverbs, verb tenses, participles, everything that makes a language, these 50 children had made up from whole cloth. It exists today as NSL, Nicaraguan Sign Language. Amazing, right? Amazing. The same way we have American Sign, they have Nicaraguans. Who invented it? Well, nobody did. It just emerged. Language was and is an emergent phenomenon. It's a spontaneous word. What's more important than language? There might be a couple of things, but there's only a couple. Right? And you start looking around at how life unfolds, and you see this everywhere. You'll never be able to unsee it once you start to see it. So, okay, if that's true of Nicaraguans with sign language, who invented English? Well, that's a stupid question too. Some people will always answer Shakespeare, so I throw him up first. Anybody actually speak like this? God, I hope not. God, I hope not. But here's the thing, who's the